We may never know why a well-off 64-year-old retiree with no known political agenda planned and staged the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. The only certainty so far that Las Vegas has risen to the occasion, with citizens of one of the fastest-growing cities in the United States coming together in solidarity. Enter, if you will, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, touching down in Vegas this Wednesday. Can he genuinely comfort the city and the nation while dodging the issue of gun control? His supporters want even fewer restrictions on weapon sales. And if Barack Obama's tears of frustration couldn't turn the tide after that 2012 mass shooting at an elementary school in Connecticut, don't bet on change this time around. Beyond the shows of solidarity, deep divisions have been laid bare once again over guns, the root cause of the violence, the role of the government in keeping citizens safe and also mentally healthy, arguments that go beyond one nation's borders. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the expectations surrounding Donald Trump's visit to Las Vegas. And with us from Las Vegas, Christy Wilcox, reporter for KSNV TV, NBC News 3, Las Vegas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
From Nashville, we'll be joined by commentator Scotty Nell Hughes. Joining us from the U.S. Capitol, former Ohio State Senator Capri Cafaro. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And a pleasure, as always, to speak to Josh Kraushaar, political editor at the National Journal.
Good to be here.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Investigators hope that the girlfriend of the Las Vegas gunman will help shed light on Sunday's slaughter. The 62-year-old Australian national landed earlier in Los Angeles after a weeks-long trip to her native Philippines. In Las Vegas, well, the blood drives continue as survivors come to terms with the ordeal. France 24's Philip Crowther and Sonia Dridi filed this report.
The community ambulance team had been contracted by the music festival in downtown Las Vegas. Oscar Monterosa was meant to provide first aid just in case. But then the nightmare scenario happened.
Typically special events, you're just handing out Band-Aids. In this particular situation, giving out sunscreen, things like that. It's typically supposed to be very low stress. That's part of the reason why I picked it up, just one of those easy overtime shifts. And it turned out not to be that way.
Oscar Monterosa and the rest of the paramedic team were the first to jump into action and save lives. This Iraq War veteran is now considered a hero.
In the interview, a lot of the shots were, headshots, chest and upper back and upper arms. There's a lot of people that I personally had to declare deceased, which was incredibly heartbreaking, especially since their family members were by their sides. They would often, they would cry and beg, not just me, but other people to resuscitate, to help them, and they'd even be angered because, I'm not doing anything.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to deliver some meals for you guys.
Thank you.
To lighten the somber mood in Las Vegas, Amanda is one of many people who now pay visits to first responders and hospital staff with a warm meal in hand.
Thank you so much.
You're very kind.
The community definitely has come together, I think, more than what people thought. I mean, just hearing the sheriff speak, like everybody's donations are having to go elsewhere because there's just so many blood donations, so many food donations, so it's crazy to see that.
These are small deeds, but in Las Vegas they are making a difference. The city for now is synonymous with the worst mass killing in the modern history of the United States.
Footnote, correspondent Philip Crowther saying that paramedic that you heard in that report, eagerly looking forward to meeting with Donald Trump. Christy Wilcox, you were one of the first journalists on the scene. What's known as a worldwide tourist destination now being synonymous with mass shootings. What's the mood like there?
I was heartbroken. I think speechless. So it's something that I think law enforcement and first responders have been waiting and watching long time, but of course, nobody ever thought this would happen. I mean, I think we hoped that it wouldn't happen, and it's from businesses that say absolutely not getting business. People are, I think, in a depression to some sense, and but I'd also like to believe that's because so many people are focused on giving. Contributing in certain ways, giving blood, however they can help the community right now. So there's a lot of people at this time too.
Yeah, that paramedic describing extremely traumatic scenes, both for him and, of course, the victims he was tending to, not at all expecting to go to a war zone. What was your feeling Sunday?
It's, as you know, and you don't expect it on the Las Vegas Strip. I mean, you just don't expect it. When we arrived on scene, we got 20 minutes after it happened, and we were actually able to turn on Las Vegas Boulevard and park almost directly across. And at that point, people were fleeing from Mandalay Bay. They were running across the street. We ran into a man who had his shirt was just bloodied, and he was yelling, "Please help us! Please help us!" 4 of my friends were just shot to death, and he was just so frantic. And I'm thinking, you can't even believe this. This cannot be real. And then there were it was very, very odd because they're saying there's still an active shooter, possibly at a high level. We don't know who this person is at this point. And so you're thinking, okay, you want to protect yourself, but many people were just kind of walking down the strip as if, nothing had happened at that point. And I'm sure some people didn't know, but it was just chaotic in some senses, and then in other senses, surreal was happening.
Capri Cafaro, how do you make sense of what happened Sunday?
You really can't. I mean, here is an individual who, by all accounts, sounds like he had a very successful life, was close with his mother and his brother in Florida, had a domestic partner, companion, girlfriend, whatever you want to call her, had money in the bank. But at the same time, obviously, methodically and meticulously planned this massacre from, modifying these guns, which I think is a real, area for concern, the modifications, because even though the firearms themselves were purchased legally, there should be a debate, I think, around these additional modifications that turn these weapons into basically, military-grade weapons, for lack of a better term. But, I mean, this man is obviously clearly deranged, and expected not to leave this hotel alive, planted cameras. So, it's incredibly difficult. And I think that, the world mourns with Las Vegas. Anytime you have this kind of an unprecedented surprise event, you put yourself in those shoes. I myself, actually, in my former state Senate district, there was a shooting, a high school in one of the local high schools that just rocked a small community in suburban Ohio. And so it can happen anywhere, whether it's one person, 4 people, or 59. This has unfortunately become, a part of the American narrative over the last, decade or so.
And are you resigned to that? That's just the way life is in America?
No, I don't think anyone is resigned to it, that this is just the way things are in America. But I do think that we have to be realistic in the fact that, the role of gun ownership is very complex here in the United States of America because of the Second Amendment, providing us with the right to bear arms. Yes, there are some that will make the argument that, at the time that the Constitution was written, it was meant for a militia, that, it's not intended to have, military-grade weapons on the streets, that, it's about hunting and sportsmen and things of that nature. But it's a culturally rooted value amongst a number of Americans, and there is an urban-rural divide. I think it was the Pew Research Center here, a nonpartisan research center here in the United States, that showed that over 80% of rural Americans identify being able to own a gun as a key component of what it means to have freedom in the United States, as opposed to 59% of gun owners in urban communities across America. So it is about finding that balance between preserving what we believe are our liberties as law-abiding citizens to own guns. I myself was endorsed by the NRA, even though I was a Democrat, because I believe that, law-abiding citizens should be able to do what they want to do. But there does need to be a conversation surrounding issues of background checks and mental fitness, some of these adaptive technologies for guns. But that is a difficult conversation to have as well, because, you can make the argument that you're encroaching on matters of privacy and individual liberties as well. And that is also part of what it means to be an American for many.
Yeah, because maybe Scotty Nell Hughes can help me with this one. Here in Europe, we just don't understand. He had rigged 12 semi-automatic rifles with devices that allowed the guns to fire like automatic weapons. And those semi-automatic rifles, he purchased them legally. These aren't handguns or hunting rifles. These are semi-automatic weapons.
Absolutely. And it's very unfortunate that what's happened here. But what's happened here in the United States when it talks about what specific guns are able to be controlled and what specific guns are able to be sold and not be sold is we're missing common sense right now. We're missing issues where you can take anything, whether you're talking about a vehicle or the internet, and in the hands of evil, they're going to find some way to commit to the act that they want to do. In the hands of good, they can be a very wonderful tool to use. We can do research projects. We can reach out to friends. We can drive to work. But in the hands of evil, they're going to find a way to commit their ludicrous acts. So I think what we need to be talking about is common sense.
Why would anyone need to buy a semi-automatic weapon?
Well, and they're not, the key is about what area you do live in. And the idea that this was bought legally, but this man, and there are many gun owners, in fact, the majority of gun owners, 99% of gun owners who would own one of these weapons would be doing it because they have the right to do it and they fear one day they might need to protect their family. Or in this case, there are actually some shotguns that are used in hunting situations that are a lot more powerful than what this man used. But unfortunately, because he had it loaded and used it in a way that is very much was meant to cause ultimate destruction and ultimate death, he was successful in it, and it was just a little adapter that was put on there. In this case, this could also, that type of equipment could be used on a hunting rifle in order to go duck hunting if you want to shoot a lot of ducks. There's justifications for it. It's more about the person who's using it and what is their intention. Are they good or are they bad?
Well, Australia tried a different approach. They basically, after one mass shooting, banned assault rifles. You could still have a hunting rifle there, but not on an assault rifle.
But a hunting rifle can do just as much damage in a lot of cases as an assault rifle can do. It's all about what is the motivation for it. And in this case, as we've seen, when you have stronger gun control rules, that doesn't mean that you're going to have a decrease in gun violence, as in the cases of Chicago and Washington, D.C. But this is where the argument in the United States is going awry. I believe this argument has been hijacked by the extremes on both the left and the right, with both of them having something in common. They don't trust each other, and they don't trust the United States government. And when you're having those types of conversations without trust, without common sense, you're having the continued repeat of events like we have seen in the United States. But just a case, an example here in Nashville, because our community was rocked very hard with what happened in Las Vegas. But just 3 weeks before, we had a church shooting here where a bad guy came in with a gun, but he was stopped by a good guy with a gun. And often those stories are not told, and those are the stories right now why the American citizens believe we have a Bill of Rights, not a Bill of Needs, that we have the right to stop the bad guys, because for some reason they don't care about the law, and they always have a way of finding means to do their harm.
Josh Kraushaar, you who haunts the halls of Congress, is it a case, as you just heard Scotty Nell Hughes, of extremes hijacking the conversation?
Well, look, I think there's a larger bipartisan consensus than is fully appreciated among red state, more moderate Democrats, and also the vast majority of Republicans in resisting a lot of these wide-ranging measures that could regulate firearms or that could require a greater scope of background checks. I just wrote today about all the Democrats who are up in states that Donald Trump won have been very silent about gun control in the wake of the Las Vegas shooting. You look at the polling, recent polling, NBC Wall Street Journal poll found a majority of Americans, including a decent chunk of Democrats, who are resistant to more regulations for guns. So it's the reason why you're not seeing legislative action in Washington is that Republicans are certainly united for the most part, but you have a lot of these rural Democrats too, and I think Capri made an excellent point earlier that this isn't just a partisan issue; it's a geographic and demographic issue. So you have a minority of the urban representatives on the coasts that are very much for gun control and are very much activists on that front lately. But you do have this bipartisan coalition that the NRA inculcates. I mean, Capri was endorsed by the NRA. She's from suburban Ohio, and she actually, was endorsed by the NRA in her state legislative campaigns. So this isn't just a partisan issue. The reason why we don't see a whole lot of legislative action in Washington is that you have enough Democrats, not a majority, but enough Democrats from these rural states and congressional districts that have resisted gun control measures.
All right, we're going to pick up on this point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Donald Trump is in Las Vegas, and we're looking at what the reaction is or should be to the worst mass shooting in U.S. history perpetrated Sunday evening in Las Vegas. We're talking about it with one of the first reporters on the scene, Christy Wilcox of KSNV TV, NBC News 3 Las Vegas. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to commentator Scotty Nell Hughes from Nashville. From Washington, former Ohio State Senator Capri Cafaro, and the politics editor at the National Journal, Josh Krashour, also in the U.S. Capitol. Christy Wilcox, we were talking about different cultures when it comes to guns according to where you are. Now, Las Vegas is interesting. A growing U.S. city, which at the same time has bit of that Wild West frontier spirit, what with the desert just outside the door.
America, I come from Western Pennsylvania, and I down to clarification. When people hear gun control, I think a lot of times what they might be hearing is, you're going to take away my right to the Second Amendment. And so I guess the debate can continue and we can talk about gun control, but until we clarify what that means for rural America and the threat they feel, this debate, I believe, is going to be going on for a very long time. And I can tell you, yesterday I did a story with multiple people who used trucks to load up people that were wounded, who had been shot during the scene. And the man that I talked to, he's a Marine, and I asked him, issue is going to come up. People are going to start debating this issue. How do you feel? And he really looked at me and said, I'm pro-gun. He said he believes that any person that's whacked out or wants to accomplish something like this is going to accomplish something like this one way or the other. I mean, he did guns, but he turned them into something that is illegal. So, another thing, the conversation had come up months before about putting bollards on the strip because they were scared that someone was going to come along in a car and run over a massive amount of people. And that was actually supposed to start happening on Monday. Put more security. So I think it's a big divide in our community.
A big divide in the community and a big divide, as we were saying just before the break, in Congress. Congressional Republicans have a bill ready for a vote that would allow armor-piercing bullets and silencers. That's right, the legislation that would allow, make legal silencers. Jeff Duncan, he's a congressman from South Carolina, Republican, one of the sponsors. He says, my hearing has been damaged because of gun noise. Had I had access to a suppressor, it may have protected me, as well as millions of other Americans, from this sort of hearing loss. The legalization of silencers, what could possibly go wrong? Caprico Faro, it just sounds ominously dangerous from this side of the Atlantic. We're sort of scratching our heads. Why would you legalize silencers?
I think that this is a very reflective of the difference between the United States and Europe and frankly, most of the Western developed nations. Because of the value placed on the Second Amendment and the place of firearms in our Constitution, our governing document, and on which our nation was built upon, I think that there are a number of people, whether they are in office, whether they are Republicans or Democrats, that see that as carte blanche and do not see any nuances in regards to the ability to either modify firearms, have a different type of firearm. And here's another thing I do want to bring up to the viewers, around the world. When we talk about assault weapons, we had an assault weapon ban in 1994 under the Bill Clinton administration. It was able to lapse in 2004. It just sunset. It was a 10-year assault weapon ban. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean that it's Rambo with an Uzi with these like huge machine gun groups of ammunition. It's actually could be an extended magazine clip, which means it has one or two more bullets than the usual handgun. That's also considered an assault weapon under the law in the United States. So I know I've digressed a bit. I'm a little hesitant on the silencer issue. I think that if you're concerned about hearing, there are probably better ways to do it in regards to ear protection, to be able to protect, your hearing if that is the real concern surrounding silencers. But I think that certainly it is opening up, and I do say this again as someone who has supported the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms throughout my entire legislative career. We have to be very careful on where we draw the line in making the firearms that, when modified, create a greater danger in the hands of crazies. And crazies are going to get whatever they want, no doubt about it. But why make it easier for the crazies to do so?
Josh Krashauer, forgive me for being a little cynical, but is it all a question of money? You heard Christy Wilcox say you're either for or against the Second Amendment, and it's big business, these guns.
It is, and there's certainly lobbies, the NRA being the most influential of them. But, it's interesting. The NRA doesn't donate a ton of money historically to candidates directly. Their influence largely stems from the fact that there are a lot of gun owners, and a lot of gun owners in America feel very strongly about their guns. So you have a good chunk of the NRA base that are single-issue voters. They will only care about who gets an NRA endorsement on a congressional scorecard, and they'll go to the polls, not just for members of Congress, but for state legislators and a whole host of other constitutional offices. So that's what makes it so challenging. I mean, you can look at polls that show, say 70% of people support more background checks, but it's that 30% that are so intense and will go to their congressmen's offices and rally and hold all kinds of events, demonstrating their clout, and that's what makes it so challenging. So the NRA doesn't give a ton of money compared to other interest groups when it comes directly to congressional campaigns, but they have a lot of influence based on their membership. And I'd also add one point when it comes to public opinion, when it comes to the data. We've actually seen an uptick in these big mass murders, these horrible murders like we saw in Las Vegas over the weekend. But when it comes to the overall homicide rate in the United States, it's actually down pretty significantly since the mid-1990s. And there hasn't been, historically at least, a strong correlation between the number of guns owned or the Brady Bill or the number of gun regulations and the actual homicide rate when you look at the whole big picture. So if you're wondering why there isn't a political will about, trying to get more gun control on the books, I think most people see these mass shootings as extremely tragic, but I also think they may feel safer, generally speaking, at least in the last 20, 25 years in this country, as the homicide rate has actually dropped fairly significantly.
It's dropped, has gone up the last year or two, mostly violence in inner cities, say studies. The United States, the developed world's runaway leader in gun ownership, a runaway leader in suicides by guns, homicides by guns, mass shootings. That's according to annual surveys done by the UN. And this is, look at this chart here. Homicides by firearm per 1 million people. 29.7 in the United States. Second place, Switzerland. Well, it's only 7.7. And yet, Scotty Nell Hughes, that doesn't change your opinion in any way.
Absolutely not, because you have to look at where the majority of those homicides are going on. I mean, it has been national headlines, the amount of violence that's incurred in Chicago every single week and the amount of unfortunate homicides that are happening there. But that's why this is a very politicized event, especially when you have a mass shooting like what we saw in Las Vegas. This is a great meat and potato issues for Republicans to talk about. It's like immigration for Democrats. The gun issue, the Second Amendment issues are for Republicans. It's actually something that they can unify their base around. But the key is once again, when you issue rules like what we saw our congressman in South Carolina, they're going after the legal gun owners. Never do we actually see after those that have actually committed crimes. That's why there is a major push right now. Let's actually put forward legislation that hurts the people that are doing the wrong with the guns. Let's actually encourage a stronger sentence on those that commit crimes with a gun. And unfortunately, that type of legislation does not get pushed through. That does not get talked about. We don't talk about.
So you're
really
for stronger
mental health
background
like we
checks
should
then?
be,
Is that how I should understand it?
Of those issues when these happen. I do think that we do need to have some form of background checks. I agree, crazy people. But to Capri's comment, crazy people are going to modify anything. I can take any tool. If I am going to commit harm, I can modify it whether or not the government is involved. And as far as we have shown, every single person that has gone in there and committed one of these heinous acts that have killed multiple people, regardless if they were doing it with a vehicle or if they were doing it with a gun themselves, that nothing would have stopped them. No law more than likely would have stopped them. For some reason, those folks are always having able access to get guns, which they go onto the black market just like they do with drugs. When they want to find a tool, they will find it. These kind of legislations that are put forward only usually punish and penalize those folks that are law-abiding citizens that just want to protect their constitutional rights. And they see if you start chipping away, even if it's just a little bit, they fear that that just opens Pandora's box, and eventually you will see a whiteout of the Second Amendment rights to bear arms.
May I jump in here really quickly, just
Sure.
to add on to what Scotty was saying? Two things that I think that we need to think about, and they're related, and that is the issue of increased homicides, and why that is in areas where conceively the gun laws are more stringent, and that's the issue of investing in law enforcement. In Ohio, for example, we have gone through over the last decade significant reductions in local government funds that help support our police departments. And so without adequate law enforcement on the streets, you're not going to have the ability to be able to get violent criminals off the streets. So that is, I think, very important and something that is not being talked about. The other aspect of this is in the rural communities, and I can say this from the rural areas that I represented for 10 years, there are a number of townships, areas that don't have a local police department, that have to wait for the county sheriff to drive 45 minutes maybe if they call in a complaint to 911. Those people are concerned about protecting themselves for real.
Capri Kafar, let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about this, because you're saying that basically you need more public funding for law enforcement. When we see that these guns are used more than not for suicides, what about using public funding as well for mental health care?
Mental health.
And
no
on that
question.
point,
I'm also a licensed social worker. So I'm all for that, and that is incredibly important, whether it is with our veterans with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries, or early intervention for those that are our adolescents, older adults that actually have a pretty high suicide rate that is not talked about. More investment in mental health is incredibly important in order to, if you're not going to do a background check, you might as well try to do our best to prevent these acts before they happen, whether you're going to harm yourself or others.
Christy Wilcox, there's, of course, the strain right now of blood drives trying to save lives that's still going on where you are. There's going to be the longer-term trauma. How is Las Vegas going to hold up in terms of helping people in the long run overcome this ordeal?
I want to touch base on the gun for a second. Last November, I want to mention this. There on the ballot to have background checks across the board, and Nevada voted to have background checks across the board, so that people who were selling guns from one person to the other were all go through a background check. But it started to stumble. The FBI and the state couldn't come to, or the FBI basically said, well, you can't use our database in order to background check, these people. So I think that was kind of a stumbling point for what I wanted to see at that point. As for the blood drives and the traumatic aspect of it, I was talking to somebody from what's called the Traumatic Intervention Program or team here. They're called TIP. And they go out. We have many, many homicides. I cover them all the time. They go out and they support these people. And they've been looking for people who have experience. The other day, I know that Circus was asking years to come in and counsel people who needed to talk to people, have support. I know this TIP, the people from TIP were going from hospital to hospital and counseling the nurses and the doctors and people who were treating a lot of the victims. So I have no, this will continue. I think the reason there, it's just about people to realize, hey, I'm having trouble seeking out that help.
Josh Kraushaar, right now there's the move in Washington to repeal and replace Obamacare. Is there a conversation going on about whether or not it's the state's role when it comes to mental health? It may turn out, of course, that the person who carried out this mass shooting was somebody who could have used some help or counseling or something that could have prevented him from carrying this all out.
Yeah, I mean, that's been an issue. It was an issue during the Obamacare debate. Several members have brought that up in their own separate pieces of legislation over the years. But what's so confounding, it seems, about this shooting is that there's no obvious, at least right now, political motive or any motive at all. He doesn't seem to have been involved in any political group or extremist group. He didn't apparently have any psychological issues that we know of, at least at this point. So this is what's so frustrating, I think, at least from an observer here in Washington, is that there's no obvious solutions. He was able to purchase it. Sounds like he was able to purchase at least most of his firearms legally. He didn't have any psychological issues that we know of, and he didn't have any known political beliefs that he's talked to at least his family or friends about. So we're going to find out more in the days to come, but it really is one of the reasons that this case has been so frustrating is there's no obvious reason why he caused the largest, most devastating mass shooting in recent history.
Before leaving Washington, Donald Trump hinting that investigators were making progress on that score, Josh. Your thoughts on whether or not this is an important moment for Donald Trump so far in his presidency?
Well, empathy is not the president's strong suit. He got decent marks when he was responding to the congressional baseball shooting a few months ago when Congressman Steve Scalise was wounded on the baseball field. And I think that he at least showed some compassion and made some statements that were well received by both parties. But as we saw yesterday in Puerto Rico, empathy is not this president's strong suit, and that's putting it mildly. So I think there are a lot of Republicans gritting their teeth, frankly, and Democrats as well, about what Trump will say at this visit to the hospitals in Las Vegas.
The visits to the hospitals in Las Vegas, of course, we heard from his press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is emphatic that, now is not the time in any case to be talking about gun control.
There's a time and place for a political debate, but now is the time to unite as a country, and it would be premature for us to discuss policy when we don't fully know all the facts or what took place.
Josh, how have those remarks gone down in Washington?
Under predictable partisan lines. You do have divisions, as we all know, in Washington, and there's not a lot of bipartisan compromise. I think sadly, that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders is right that there's going to be a lot of we're not going to really focus on a legislative solution, and I don't know if there is a legislative solution. The challenge is, I mean, even Democrats. I was doing some reporting on the members of Congress who are Democrats in Nevada, and while they largely support gun control measures, they didn't even want to talk about gun control. The Congresswoman Jackie Rosen, who's running in the state's big Senate race next November, gave a very anodyne, very generic statement, not wanting to talk about guns, not wanting to bring up specific policy solutions in the days after the shooting. So this is not, like I said, this is not strictly a partisan issue. Clearly, Democrats would love to have some movement on gun control, some small-scale regulations, but even members of their own party, even members in the Nevada delegation, aren't as eager as some of the more nationalized voices.
Christy Wilcox, Las Vegas, how is it coping as well with all the attention that it's getting at this point? What are people saying about the fact that, well, you're under the limelight now the way we were in Paris?
For us, I mean, we're used to being known as the entertainment capital of the world, and we want to continue to be known as that. I mean, I'm very proud of my city. I'm very proud of what we do for other people when they come to our city, and the last thing you want on people's minds is to say, well, should we go to Las Vegas, attend this festival, or going to be back of people's minds. So it's worrisome. We've continuously seen the number of coming into McCarran International Airport go up. I think it's been up to 44 million or something like that per year, and it just continues to rise. And I think that Las Vegas wants to fight to continue to provide that kind of entertainment to people. So it's a challenging thing for.
All right, and our thoughts, of course, are with the people of Las Vegas in these trying times. Christy Wilcox, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank as well Scotty Nell Hughes in Nashville, Capri Cafaro, and Josh Krashour in Washington. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. We say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
We heard Josh Krashour say empathy is not Donald Trump's strong suit.
No, absolutely, and it's never really been clearer than in the last couple of days. In particular, when talking about Las Vegas, he used the word miracle, saying it was a miracle what happened there, and no one really could understand why he would choose to use that word. He used it first in an off-the-cuff remark to a reporter, but then used it again in a tweet later on the same day, saying it is a miracle how fast the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police were able to find the demented shooter and stop him from even more killing. Plenty of people pointing out that it wasn't actually that fast. It was 72 minutes before that shooter was actually tracked down. And Trevor Noah from The Daily Show pointing this out. Actually, he killed himself. The miracle is that he was allowed to buy 42 guns and countless ammunition. And that issue of gun control is raging on all the social networks, in all the media around the world, really. Taking a look at some of the cartoonists who've been reacting to this latest tragedy. This is actually an old cartoon from 2013 that's been recirculated by David Rowe, who is actually an Australian cartoonist. And Australia often held up as the example that the US could use to modify their attitude towards guns. 650,000 taken out of circulation after 35 people died in a massacre in 1996. This cartoon too from Australia, too familiar, it says. Too soon, this is titled When to Talk About Gun Control. Too soon when the gun is still smoking, too hard when it's not, too late when it's been fired again, and so the cycle continues. Other cartoons on the subject, well, this one from a Chilean illustrator says 60 years before the attack in Las Vegas, and you've got a father handing over a gun to his son. Now, of course, we know that the father, in this case of Stephen Paddock, was actually wanted by the FBI and an armed robber, no less, so it's not quite the cutesy farm life picture that you see there. And this image too by a Dutch cartoonist really catching a lot of people's imaginations. It's quite shocking, it's quite brutal, but a lot of people sharing that one online. The other thing, of course, that people are talking about is Donald Trump's lack of humanity when he went to Puerto Rico, of course, hit by Hurricane Maria 2 weeks ago now. He was there yesterday. Michael Jollett, he's actually a singer in an indie band, but tweets regularly about Donald Trump. Just puts one word, presidential, and you've got Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, all embracing victims of natural disasters, while you have Donald Trump tossing kitchen paper, a kitchen roll, at people who have lost everything. This drawing, I don't know who it's done by. I would love to know, this watercolour. Donald Trump also spoke about the fact that the rebuilding of Puerto Rico had really knocked their budget out of whack. So this artist has him whacking a golf ball in the ruins of Puerto Rico. Another image as well. If you look at a real catastrophe like him, we can be proud of our leaders in Puerto Rico as he's tossing that kitchen roll. And of course, that is a nod to yet another ill-thought-through comment that Donald Trump made yesterday, where he referred to, you haven't suffered a real catastrophe like Hurricane Katrina. Now, of course, the death toll was far higher in Hurricane Katrina, but these are people who still have lost so much. Most of them are without power, they've lost homes, they have no food. So to tell them that they haven't suffered a real catastrophe did upset a lot of people.
Try saying that to the families of the 34 dead.
Absolutely.
Now, Donald Trump sometimes goes rogue when he goes off script. You got to feel for the UK Prime Minister, who today was reading from the prompter.
She was. It's one of those days where nothing was going right for Theresa May, the British Prime Minister. Politico took this line from her speech, which really
This is before the
the
Conservative Party Congress.
Absolutely, at the conference in Manchester, where this is the keynote speech where the leader lays out what her vision is for the party and the rest of the country will watch. The test of a leader is how you respond when tough times come upon you, and they really did during this speech. She had absolutely everything thrown at her. If she had a comedian who popped up, how he got through security, I don't know, handing her a P45, saying it's from Boris Johnson, the man many people feel is actually trying to steal her crown at the helm of the Conservative Party and could be Britain's next Prime Minister. There is the actual...
Oh, so it's the equivalent of a pink slip.
It is indeed, yes.
Okay.
You're handed your P45 when you are put out of a job.
Oh, dear.
But it didn't stop there. She's suffering from a cold and she had terrible trouble throughout the speech, but she did do her best to turn it to her advantage, and the guys in the party did try to help her out. Take a look at this.
The innovators and entrepreneurs. I hope you noticed that, ladies and gentlemen, the Chancellor giving something away free. And we... Shows what good the Chancellor's cough suite is.
Terrible bad luck for Theresa May, but it does seem to have gone down quite well with those little jokes that she managed to make there.
She rebounded the best she could. Emma James, many thanks. We want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.